I have a compulsion to talk about Summer Game Fest, but I can be a bit catty when it comes to game media shows, specifically anything that has his face in it. I consider Geoff Keighley to be my nemesis. He has never heard of me, but nonetheless, he is my nemesis. I was actually working on a very large video a couple months ago about that very topic, but the move disrupted it, and the Dead by Daylight video kinda spawned in its place, but the chances that video are dead is zero. Absolute stone cold zero. It is but a matter of time. It normally comes around once a year after I reach my limit with the Game Awards. Bottom line is that I respect what Geoff Keighley has accomplished, especially in the wake of E3's collapse, even if I do hold him partially responsible. However, I struggle to respect him. Despite the obvious control he has over many aspects of these events and this very clear love he has for the art form of video games, I feel he does a lot to fail them with events like Summer Games Fest. And no matter what comes out of my mouth in this video, I assure you I am significantly more passionate about the Game Awards. Quick disclaimer, despite the nature of this video, I have no thoughts on Geoff Keighley as a person, as shocker, I do not know him. This is purely regarding his position as curator and host, and I wouldn't even be able to make this stupid video if these events didn't exist, and that will always be something I am grateful for. Anyway, these events are important for gaming, as E3 used to be, but E3 was a regulated event and a gathering place for all the major players, and they all had a space the length of Summer Game Fest each. Their biggest issue is probably the centricity of the major publishers. Geoff Keighley's events feel like they are about Geoff Keighley and his relationship with the game industry, which is funny because my personal theory is that backfired on him this year. So I want to start a little tradition here on Sir Imaginative of reviewing Geoff Keighley's big events: Summer Game Fest, Gamescom Opening Night Live, and of course, the Game Awards. I'm not going to be a prat about it, I'll be more than happy to give credit where it's due, but I do believe that it's important to keep this stuff logged because I swear Geoff Keighley is trying to 5D chess the audience every year and it drives me crazy, so now you have to see it too. This video would come off a lot less like the ramblings of a madman if I actually finished that video I mentioned earlier, but I'm going to do it anyway because this is about as petty as I get, so here we go. If I had to sum up this year's Summer Game Fest in one word, that word would be really weird. That's 2 words. There was something off about the whole thing, and it's immediately visible. We start off with the classic, look how many cool games we've already had this year, which he is not wrong about. As with most years, video games have provided an embarrassment of riches that result in a war between the hours in the day and the money in my wallet. The true outliers here, in terms of their context, are Repo and Schedule 1, indie games from tiny development teams that have absolutely outdone any reasonable expectations, largely through the classic streamer circulation method. Keighley takes note of this, saying it is, and I quote,
"It's inspiring that these indie creations stand side by side with heavyweights like Monster Hunter Wilds and the Oblivion remake."
He's not wrong. He's not wrong. But it sort of leans into this narrative that's been building over the last few years that indie will be like the savior of the industry, which is a lovely idea. I too love a good indie game that just does something really fucking cool. I just got done replaying Crow Country, a love letter to survival horrors that I absolutely adore. But I've always seen that idea as a bit optimistic. For every indie that pops off, there are hundreds that barely see the light of day, and I just can't see a world where they sustain the industry financially, even if they do sustain it creatively, as neat as that would be. Plus, I like AAA games, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't. Either way, Geoff is quite content to ignore any such complexity and sort of uses this as the undercurrent for the entire show. This idea that indies and AAA and whatever comes in between can stand side by side. You can really see it when he starts talking about Expedition 33, which he mentions just after the whole Repo Schedule 1 bit. Claire Obscure has done phenomenally well, as it deserves to, with a record-breaking Metacritic score and being seen as a Game of the Year contender already. Keighley focuses on the team size, being about 30 people, who, again, I quote,
bravely stepped away from big publishers to forge their own path.
Now, again, not wrong, but I do feel it's a tiny tad disingenuous. It completely ignores the 50k grant they received from Epic, as well as other sources from funding from inside France. It's not like any group of 30 people could have gotten together and just made Expedition 33 with that level of graphical fidelity and the lineup of talent. Please don't misconstrue me, the last thing I want is to diminish the incredible accomplishments of these games. Expedition 33 is a generational JRPG just without the J. I'm playing through it right now, it's insanely good. My point is merely that Geoff was a journalist, and the man knows how to choose his words, so while he is telling the objective truth as he does a Michael Jackson lean toward the positive end of the spectrum, It feels like he's omitting details to tap into this whole David versus Goliath, indie versus AAA thing that's going on, and completely ignoring how rare it actually is for an indie to do this well. Never mind the fact that often these numbers are misrepresented. Games like Balatro are famously labelled one-person endeavours, which is incredibly misrepresentative. When you then consider the really quite unprofessional Splitgate 2 segment, it starts to come off as slightly combative and adds to that uncomfortable air in the show. Where am I going with it? That's fair, I did get a bit carried away. Well, this is a theme that carries on throughout the show, smaller dev teams creating ambitious projects, and to be fair, many of them look fucking wicked. But I couldn't shake this feeling that's going to come off a little conspiracy theorist, and I'll admit there's no exactly hard proof, but it felt to me like it was being done to make up for the lack of major reveals. If you go back and look at what was revealed during the 2024 Summer Game Fest, it certainly feels like a bigger show. This year was largely cinematics and heavily edited gameplay trailers, many of them from games we already knew about and have seen plenty of, and those we didn't were often the small studios. The only extended gameplay clip was a cutscene from Death Stranding 2, which felt a bit out of place for me with the gameplay reveal happening days after. Definitely comes across as wanting to get Death Stranding on the stage at any cost, and given Keighley and Kojima's relationship, that wouldn't surprise me. The longest section was when they were talking about not showing the Hitman Bond crossover after they very quickly skipped past the whole mind's eye thing, and now we know why. It felt much lighter on the whole world premieres thing that Geoff is so very fond of, with the only really big one being Resident Evil 9, which they had to bait out of us twice. I'm so mad about that, even if it did turn me into a fucking goblin. Add on to that Keighley's habit to put whatever is big and popular above all else, and his favourite hobby of mentioning when he's been involved in a game's reveal or seen it before release. It kind of creates this impression that he was using these smaller devs to fill the gaps where he'd normally have some big game reveal. Don't get me wrong, there were some really cool games at Summer Games Fest. Mortal Shell getting a sequel is neat, there's End of Abyss, Mouse PI, and the potential of the Atomic Heart stuff. Onimusha continues to look wicked, Felt That, Fractured Bloom, Ill, and Mina the Hollower are all games I plan on keeping an eye on. They shadow dropped the Lies of P DLC, the Street Fighter Season 3 trailer was funny as hell, and let's not forget the Strangers of Heaven is shaping up to be very interesting, and we actually got Resident Evil 9 and it isn't even that far away. So it's not like there weren't plenty of really cool games, but with barely anything getting longer than 2 minutes and a few very similar feeling titles, very few actually got to stand out. I can't imagine how this is all coming across, but this has nothing to do with my imagined long-term rivalry with Geoff Keighley, but it has a lot to do with the state of play and the Xbox showcase. Being 2 days before and 2 days after, they sandwiched Summer Game Fest, and I gotta say it was not a nice sandwich. You had 2 beautiful, plump, fluffy, lightly buttered slices of bread with 4 slivers of ham lining the edges to create an illusion of a good sandwich. Nothing from either company was saved for SGF, which is mildly hilarious, instead choosing to present all of the goods themselves. The state of play was pretty solid, reminding the world that Pragmata was a thing, the James Bond First Light and Final Fantasy Tactics remake were both revealed, Silent Hill F gameplay, and a new game from Suda51, which is always wild and wacky, all to finish really strong with Marvel Tokon, which absolutely no one saw coming and looks insane. And let's not forget the most important thing, new Astrobot levels. Even Ghost of Yotei, it didn't have much to show here, but there's going to be an in-depth direct in July, which I think they did for the first game. The only thing that really felt like missing to me was anything by Insomniac. So it depends on who you are, but from where I'm sitting it was a pretty good showcase. But then Xbox, holy man. For a start, it was easily the most effectively presented show that might go unnoticed in this area, but I for one appreciate the production value. Not only that, but it felt like each game actually got to show itself off a little bit, with some getting some solidly extended trailers. The Clockwork Revolution trailer comes to mind, making me a fair bit more curious about the game. They were also sat on some pretty great reveals themselves, for stuff like Super Meat Boy 3D and No Ghost at the Grand, to more traditional fare like the new Plague Tale game, which looks to be a massive shift up, DLC for Indiana Jones, and Beast of Reincarnation, which they keep saying is made by Game Freak, but how is that the same studio that made Scarlet and Violet? And then they announced more Final Fantasy coming to Xbox, an Invincible Tag Fighter, the new game from the Spiritfarer devs, Persona, that Mudang thing. I'm so curious about that. The Outer Wilds and Grounded stuff, more of Ninja Gaiden 4, and Chronos. best of luck to Bloober Team. Honestly, it was kind of a packed showcase, and that was before they whipped out the big guns, or gun singular. The Xbox Ally, the next step on the path the Nintendo Switch started us on. We've gotten to the point where these portable PC devices are just sort of a thing now. The Steam Deck has been around for long enough, and the regular ROG has provided some solid competition, so it was about time we saw what was coming next. There's been plenty of rumors floating around for a while, but to see a system like this that's going to have Game Pass, your Steam library, and GOG, while also having the versatility of previous models, that's quite the catch. It'll be a fucking expensive catch, but I won't tell you I'm not thinking about it. The State of Play already had SGF feeling a bit lacking, which is more of a shame for the smaller games that didn't get much of a spotlight than it is for SGF itself. But then the Xbox showcase, revealing the next step in Phil Spencer's plan to turn your microwave into an Xbox, that really just took opening night out back. And to sort of bring it back to this idea that Geoff was overcompensating, like, can you see what I'm saying? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? Believe it or not, I'm not trying to be mean, but they put a lot of energy into raising up small studios, and I can't shake that it was more out of necessity than want. I certainly wouldn't expect the same attitude going into Gamescom or the Game Awards. Fortunately, Summer Game Fest is more than its opening show, and ends up encompassing the whole period. With play days, all the previews, and coinciding with Steam Next Fest, this whole week has been a bit of a banger for video games. I simply wish Geoff Keighley would focus less on making the show as fancy as possible, stuffing it fit to bursting with as many trailers as he can fit in over 2 hours, and paid more attention to what was actually happening and what people were watching. Like, there is a 50-second trailer in there for the first Ascendant update in a 2-hour show of straight trailers back to back. Who is remembering that? I miss the days of gameplay demos, man. They feel like such a rare occurrence now. Remember, there was a string of like free E3s like toward the end where Insomniac's Spider-Man 1 was there every year. We got to see a little more, and I was losing my mind every year seeing that game. That just doesn't really happen anymore. He also continues to turn his back on the audience like they aren't there, which really just rustles my jimmies on a personal level. So, in summary, I've had better sandwiches. It was a weird year for Summer Game Fest, probably the weakest since its inception, and it's most curious to see how this will impact Gamescom and the Game Awards. Either way, thank you for watching. I know this video was a bit fast and loose, but the idea was quite spur of the moment, so going forward, I'm sure to be more prepared. Like I said, I will be back for Gamescom. The biggest thing to come out of SGF for me was undoubtedly Resident Evil 9, and specifically the February release date. For those of you that don't know, I've been sitting on a promised follow-up to a Resident Evil video I made over a year ago now, and I think it's about time I got my arse in gear, especially because that video becomes more technically outdated with each upload. So starting from the date on screen, I'm going to be conducting a Resident Evil marathon of sorts over on my Twitch channel, and that's what we'll be streaming until it's done, with videos to follow. Your company would be greatly appreciated, but if I don't see you there, I will see you in the next one.